welcome to another episode of the ID Talk podcast. My name is Tony Bitzionis, and I'm here with my very, very good friend, Alex Perala. Alex,
Hello.
well, caught you off guard.
You did. I once again falling asleep over here, but back.
Um, we got a great uh, show today. We spoke with Pallavi, Sharma, and Anand Acharya, who did work on the Bhutan NDI project, and I'm really looking forward to get to that. But first, I think there's a couple of things we want to talk about before I go into what we got up to this week. Is there anything you want to highlight from the industry over the past week?
No, really slow news week. No, it's the big news I think that a lot of people are talking about is the news that just came out within the past day of us recording this, that IN Group in France is in exclusive talks to take over Idemia's biometric identity business. So we'll be talking more about that next week, more in depth, but something we definitely need to highlight right now just because it's so important. And we've been following this off and on. The news first emerged that Advent, which owns Idemia, was planning to sell it, or at least part of it, in early 2022. And then that kind of just went away and things were quiet for a while, but here we are, and it looks like a deal is in the works and probably going to happen in early 2025. But I have to be cautious about that. I was going back and forth about this a little bit today with John Bredehoft, who is pretty well known in the industry, writing about biometrics, and he worked for a long time at Idemia. And he had a little note that he wrote about the news on his website, which we can link to in the show notes, just um, cautioning that these deals can take time to really,
Mhm.
um, be settled. So they're saying 2025. I guess we'll see, but exciting news nonetheless. It could have a big impact on this industry.
Yeah, no, definitely a huge deal. And like you said, we will be addressing this more shortly, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, outside of that, it's been quite the busy week. As you may know by now, I hope you know by now, but we actually launched our rebrand this week.
Mhm.
We are now ID Tech, and we are found at www.idtechwire.com. If you still go to our old site, findbiometrics.com, you will be redirected, so don't worry about that. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a culmination of quite a bit of hard work. We are really excited, and this is also something we will be talking about more in the coming weeks.
Mhm.
Um, but outside of that, we also had last week Identity Week America in Washington, D.C., and Alex and I were both there, and that was a lot of fun. We actually did give a talk announcing the rebrand at the show. And I mean, aside from that, Alex, you moderated a panel and you did wonderfully. So I'm told I didn't go watch it. I was busy doing other stuff. But we met a lot of great people. We met people we had spoken to a bunch of times. We actually have an episode up with some of the conversations that we had on the show floor that you can check out. And outside of that, I mean, we also this podcast has its own website now,
Mm.
and that the link for that will obviously be in the description. But I feel like that's a dumb thing to say because if you're listening to this, you found the podcast. So congratulations.
Might be redundant, yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to say people should go back and listen to our last episode from Identity Week America. We had really good conversations. We talked to Neville Pattinson, who's the executive director of the IBIA, and he made some really good points about misconceptions, pardon me,
Mhm.
about facial recognition. We talked to Terry Brenner from IDverse about the legal and risk side of um, like identity verification and just like a really fresh perspective for us. We don't often get to talk to bona fide legal experts.
Mhm.
And then of course we talked to our friend Jay Meyer from Face Tech about their UR code, which is like a really innovative piece of technology.
Yeah,
And it was interesting to hear what he had to say about that. So definitely check that out. And yeah, and then for today's conversation about Bhutan NDI, I loved it.
I loved it.
Yeah,
You'll hear it in our voices in the thing. Alex and I were just gushing the whole time.
yeah, well, it helps that these people are really nice, Pallavi and
Yeah,
Anand, delightful people to talk to. And I noticed
absolutely.
Pallavi is going to be giving a talk at Identity Week Asia.
Oh
Um,
wow.
Anybody going to that, definitely go and hear what she has to say.
Yeah.
Because she's great and the Bhutan project is fascinating. As you're about to hear,
Yeah.
it's really pioneering digital identity project. It involves biometrics. It's
Hmm.
national in scale. It's like one of those things you hear about a lot. This idea that there are smaller countries that are able to kind of leapfrog in infrastructure to new technologies because they're not hindered by all the bureaucracy that some bigger countries are. So this is
Hmm.
one of those in action, and it was really fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we learn a lot every time we talk to somebody on the show, but there was a lot that I feel like we both learned from speaking to Pallavi and Anand, and perspectives that I never really considered with regards to this project. And I mean, you'll hear it, but Pallavi speaks of kind of it happens out of necessity. We do kind of gush over how rapid everything has developed there, and with regards to their digitization, but necessity because of their landscape, their physical landscape. I mean, they're in the mountains, literally, in the largest mountains in the world, and they have a relatively small population, and so technologically they just couldn't be. I think Plavi uses the term couldn't be left behind or didn't want to be left behind. Anyways, you're about to hear it. It's great. They're great, and I I just really enjoyed it.
Here, here.
Here. Shall we get to it?
Let's do it. Okay, we are now joined by Pallavi and Anand from Bhutan NDI. They're going to talk to us about a really interesting digital ID project in Bhutan, as the name suggests. So we're really interested. We wrote about this, I want to say 1 or 2 months ago. There was a big report that came out about it from the Trust Over IP Foundation, and it was fascinating. So through various channels, we were able to get in touch with people involved in the project, and here they are. So welcome to the show. We're really happy you were able to join us to talk about it today. And before we get started, maybe quickly, each of you could just introduce yourselves and explain what your role was in and is in Bhutan NDI. So Pallavi, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting us today. We are so excited to be here and talk about what we do here in Bhutan and just get the message across as far and wide as possible. So I'm Pallavi. I lead marketing and communications for Bhutan NDI. I've been with Bhutan NDI since it was a project. It's kicked off as a project between the government technology agency in Bhutan and Druk Holding and Investments. And I've just grown into my role, learned the technology, and now here we are.
Great. And Anand?
Yeah. Good evening, Alex. Thank you again for hosting us. And yeah, so I joined this project almost 1.5 years back, and I initially joined as a project manager, and I'm one of the project managers for the project. It's a very huge project, and right now I am having a dual role as a product lead also. So I'm looking into most of the product development part mostly, and also fluctuating between project management part also of the project. So right now we have spinned off into a company. So right now we have moved away from the project phase, and we are in the process of being a full-fledged company under DHI.
Okay, great. We're interested to hear more about that, but before we get there, maybe just to set the groundwork for our listeners, either of you could take this, but just in like a capsule form, how would you explain what the project was? What did it entail, and what is its role in Bhutan? Either of you could.
Okay, like Anand mentioned earlier, it kicked off as a project. So the initial goal was to create a digital trust in Bhutan's ecosystem. When we launched the project, the idea was to provide identity for citizens across and also residents, so that we can accelerate access to government and private services, and also focus heavily on financial inclusion and also economic participation. And then we were looking at a very centralized model, referencing mainly Singapore's SingPass, but it actually came from His Majesty the King, that he wanted to provide every citizens with the right to privacy, while at the same time meeting the core mandate of creating a layer of trust in Bhutan's digital ecosystem. So we then had to, refocus and pivot the strategy, and that is when we moved towards a more decentralized technology, just to address both these mandates of privacy and trust.
Okay. I was going to ask, you kind of addressed this already. It came from the king. That was the impetus for it. Was there some sort of historical event that led him to push for this, or is this just sort of naturally coming out of we're in a digital age and it's time?
Right. It is, I think, a natural progression. So just to give a little background to Bhutan's technological evolution, we started off pretty late. So I don't know if you have the context for it or not, but I would be happy to provide that. Like, for example, TV and the internet was introduced in the country only in 1999, and mobile phones were introduced only in 2003. So there was a huge leapfrog from then to now, where we now in 2015 we introduced agency banking. Then in 2020 is when the government and also the corporate sector started focusing more on Industry 4.0 and Web 3.0. So just as a natural progression, we wanted to create there's a missing layer of trust, because all of the identity and verification processes were very manual up until then. So it was just, a need that emerged, and that is how we kicked off with the digital identity project.
Yeah, just to supplement on what Pallavi also mentioned. So in 2008 and 2019, there was actually a IT vision that was created by our Majesty, and also there was whole sphere of planning and strategy around that part. So it was called a digital. The whole masterpiece was called Digital Drukgyal. So Drukgyal is Bhutan, in our language we call it Drukgyal. So we want to digitalize services, and we wanted to have a change in the society where we are more digitalized and digitized society. So actually, digital identity was a flagship in that project. So there are a number of other projects going on under the digital Drukgyal project. So mostly there were 8 or 7 pillars. So the significant ones were where you connect all of the countries, all of the schools in the countries through dark fiber. So through the fiber, and we have connected that as a first phase. And the second phase was to give identity, to have a digital identity ecosystem through which, so that I call it a flagship, our digital Bhutan NDI, because it is the main portal through which all other digital services is supposed to be accessed. So we also, along this digital Groupe project. One is called electronic patient system that's coming in that needs to be connected to our digital identity platform that we have created. So this one whole, we are just a big part of the whole puzzle. And of course, like Pallavi said, we did start with the centralized technology in mind, but that changed into decentralized because of we wanted to make it future-proof and also make it relevant in the near future where Web 3.0 is coming, and we wanted to make sure that the technology that we built withstand the test of time.
That's so, I don't know, Alex, if you feel similar, but it's so refreshing to hear all of this because like Pallavi said, a lot of things that we take for granted here were introduced a little bit later in Bhutan. But the rapid progress and the introduction of all this, and just, Alex and I, we read a lot and we write a lot about digital ID programs around the world. And it just seems like many of the times it's just things were held up and obstacles were in the way. And, especially where we live, very little gets done quickly. Everything takes 7 years of meetings and studies before anything actually happens. So it's very interesting to hear about this. And sorry, Anand, you just mentioned the decentralization, and I believe the blockchain is involved. Can you talk a little bit about why this technology was appealing and how it's involved?
Yeah, so when we started with the decentralized, we didn't really say that it has to be decentralized, but the mandate was that it has to be a system that has privacy and security as first as a design. So when we looked into the technology that is offering those privacy and security as a design first, because as you know, when internet and all of the IT technology that we design first, we just go ahead with functional, and then the security and the privacy is I think that's something that is the last drawer of the track where we just just give it as an afterthought. But as a directive from our majesty, we need to have privacy and security as a first for our citizens. So when we looked into that, there was a nascent new technology coming in called self-sovereign identity. So that self-sovereign SSI philosophy was the one where it made sure that the privacy first policy is there. Of course, decentralized. There's a decentralized repository. So I think when we say decentralized, it not necessarily has to be a blockchain technology. Any database which is distributed and which adheres to the where there's a distributed system, and then there's no one central repository of the data is kept. So that qualifies actually. So, but then there is if we take just the traditional database and distribute it, it's quite there's no ready-made technology to use. So the only ready-made technology which is tested and ready to use is the blockchain system. So that's why, if you look into the SSI philosophy, so there is lots of other moving component that came together to make us make this SSI with the privacy first technology possible. So like I said, in blockchain, then there is something called deed protocol, then this TOIP, and all the cryptography, digital signature, all those things came together at the right time for us to adopt this technology. And yeah, so that's why, because blockchain need not necessarily has to be blockchain as long as it's a distributed database system. But since we have blockchain that's developed and ready to be used, and so it's also, we said that we just go ahead with what's there in the market. So that's how we chose the blockchain system.
That makes sense. And it's also, we see this again and again. Like you said, not just with blockchain, but in general, that decentralized concept is very important to protecting data. But I suppose also with blockchain, there's also the fact that transactions are irrefutable.
Yes.
And so it's more secure in that sense. It can fight fraud and things like that. So on that note, we're also curious, how do people actually get enrolled? Like what is the registration process for somebody in Bhutan to actually set up a digital ID? How do they do that?
What happens is let's say a citizen with a smartphone. So right now the wallet is available as an edge wallet. We are looking at different other types of wallet as well, but at the moment is edge wallet available on iOS and Android phones. So what they do is once they download the Bhutan NDI wallet from the marketplace, they just have to fill in some of their basic details, which is maintained by the Department of Civil Registration and Census. And they have to complete a liveness detection and biometric verification process using the camera of the smartphone. And what happens in that process is the data that they have input in text format and the facial recognition that they have completed, it needs to match with the data that is held by DCRC. So when there is a match, then they automatically get onboarded on the platform, and then they are issued automatically again with their foundational ID, which basically includes their information around, their name, date of birth, gender, and things like that, and a second credential, which is their permanent address credential, which also again comes from DCRC, and that has details around their permanent address.
Okay, and just to be clear, it sounds like when they register, the information is checked against the database itself, right? It's not that they check it against some card that they're holding, but actually it goes directly to the government database to verify. Do I understand that right?
Yes, that's correct. So when the project when the project commenced, at that time, there was a drive to collect biometrics by DCRC itself. So citizens, there is a voluntary group called the Desung organizations. So the volunteers are Desups who went across the 20 districts in Bhutan to collect biometric data of citizens. But additional to that, we also have currently a physical citizenship ID. So that is a physical card that we have, which comes with a photo of ours. So the government has, and that needs to be renewed every 10 years. So the government maintains at least in every 10 years period, biometrics data of citizens. So it gets matched either to, first call is to the recent biometrics that were collected by the DSUPs. And if you don't find any there, because it's possible that citizens were outside the country during the biometric collection drive, then it gets matched to the citizenship ID biometrics data. So, and then once there is a match between the two data that gets submitted through the technology like the wallet and the DCRC database, and then they automatically get their digital ID.
Okay. Once again, I'm just amazed at the scale of this and how quickly you're able to do these complex things.
Right. I think it helps that, we are such a small country with a population of less than 1 million. I think that really, in fact, worked to our advantage.
Yeah, Tony and I are in a city, I think the population over a total is 3 million.
The city is 3 million. The region is 9, I think.
And we've been waiting for an extension to our subway system for like 7 years.
Yeah, they've been just tearing down buildings and then saying that the subway will be built in the next 10 years and just waiting.
So I'm getting jealous on this call. I think probably Tony is too. But
yeah. But although if all the digital ID programs around the world went this quickly, I don't know that we would have very much to write about.
No, that we'd be out of a job. That's true.
Anand, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but the digital Drukgyal program is the greater part of the greater digital transformation for Bhutan.
Yes.
But for the Bhutan NDI, what's the long-term vision? I mean, you've already sort of painted quite a picture, and
yes,
because it's progressed so quickly, but 5 years from now or so, how is it going to change the day-to-day life for citizens?
Yeah, so like what we have envisioned and what we sell also to our so right now we have just made a platform where we can have digital identity, and then now what we are, like I said, it's going to be a portal through which all the digital transaction, most of the digital transaction is supposed to happen. So just before, I think we missed the point where the digital Bhutan NDI wallet is supposed to, in the long-term future, it's not just an identity wallet. We are supposed to be one of the digital currency wallet too. So we are going to hold the CBDC, central bank digital currencies, in the future. And there's another use case of being a digital signature wallet also. So those are the three, actually, those are the three long-term vision for our wallet as a platform. So we have already achieved our identity part, and for the CBDC part, we are still talking to the central bank. And then for the digital signature, we have done to up to some extent, but we're still trying to see how we can make it more technically and also functionally more smooth for the user to actually use it in the right environment. So that's about the platform. So now, apart from just an identity, now what we are envisaging is that we are already going and talking to other organizations. So this wallet in the long run, right now we have also integrated with the Royal University of Bhutan. So that university is where you actually give your credential to those universities, and if you have passed through that any of the university in the Bhutan, colleges in Bhutan, that university actually gives your digital certificate on your wallet. So it will remain on your wallet, and then now, so in the same way, we have integrated with collaborated with some of the organizations where if you are working, you get your employee card on your wallet. So, and also we have recently launched where you get your driving license also on your wallet. So in that way, you keep on collecting all those information about you and your wallet, in the wallet about you. And so what we are envisioning is that in the long run, instead of our motor vehicle office having to collect your information from third-party source, you are the source. So if you want something, you just you have your data. So that's the SSI philosophy, where instead of your data being distributed through n number of organizations, only your data will be collected and will be in your wallet. Now you are the owner of all the data, and then whatever service you require. So I think I told about the digital GQL project. One of the major project is called e-patient system, where all your health information is also there's a system called e-patient, EPs, where all your health and information about your checkup, everything is there. But what we want to do is we want to bring that on your wallet. So now what happens is now all the services you require is on your wallet. So instead of you going to some office and asking for some service, and then that office again reach out to other office in order to get the information to give you services, you have everything on your wallet. So our long-term vision is that in Bhutan NDI, we have everything. And you go to get a service, you actually have your service on your pocket, all the information on your pocket. So I think, I don't know if, so this is one of the card where you have all the card on your thing. I don't think it's quite visible, but yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So everything is here. So you just click here, your information is here, and you share it. So our vision is that you go to get some services. So I don't know how it works in Canada, but here is like you need to get n number of documents submitted to some places to get some information or service, or even to get registered. So now you have everything on your wallet. You just digitally transfer it. So we want to bring down the time and motion part, in which like people has to wait like long time and have to the time and motion thing, like the time get reduced and you don't have to be too much in motion, like walk around to get information and things. So digitally everything is in your pocket. You just do everything just sitting in one place. So that's how we envision in the 5 years future. So in 5 years, when we have this podcast again, maybe we can achieve that vision.
Yeah. Alex and I may be living in Bhutan in 5 years based on how great this sounds. That's incredible. I mean, Alex, right? Like the amount of times we report on initiatives that are attempting to do one fraction of this, the scope of this, and just the pace of the execution is super, super incredible to see.
It's very ambitious. Oh, sorry, Pallavi. I've never heard.
No, I was just going to add that, I think I know that you keep mentioning how impressive it is, but just like where the world is moving, I think in order not to be left behind, I think we didn't have a choice but to, really pick up the pace. I don't know how much you know of Bhutan, but it's a very rugged terrain. It's a country in the Himalayas. So the terrain is very rugged. Citizens have to, travel really far distances to access even basic services. And because of which, economic participation can get hindered, access to finances can get hindered. So I think the idea is to be able to provide every citizens living in, even the highlands, to be able to access these services and also provide, their own services, because now, digital content is such a big thing, design is such a big thing, and it's not that there are no like people living in these outskirts and remote areas do not have anything to offer. They do. It's just the hassle of, making that travel through rugged terrains, and some of them from the highlands even have to walk on foot to, make that available. So I think just in order to help citizens take advantage of the digital boom, we didn't have a choice but to, really pace up and create a digital authentication mechanism so that they can actually do everything that they need to, sitting from, being at the comforts of their homes.
That makes sense. It's interesting how I never really had thought before how like the physical terrain of a country can help to influence these kinds of decisions. That's really interesting. I was gonna ask or mention earlier when Anand was going through all the different kinds of identity components that would go into the app. I know that in Europe, there's these different pilots going on now and they're exploring different concepts. And I know that's part of it. They're looking at how do we get education credentials in and stuff like that. So I'm curious, when this project was developing, were you looking also, you said you were looking at SingPass in Singapore. So I'm curious just how that inspired, how this all came about, how it all took shape, and like, were you looking at Aadhaar because that often comes up in India? Were the Europeans doing anything interesting at that time, or like what kind of factored in when this was taking shape?
Right. We did look into a lot of the digital identity models that are currently in place, including Aadhaar. Yes, we were inspired by many different service providers and countries that had successfully rolled this out. But I think what really helped is the vision was very clear. In our case, what did we actually want to achieve by rolling out a project of this scale? So the idea was, firstly, of course, to, inclusion was a very big factor to be able to, help citizens, like I already mentioned, from, all parts of the country and even residents. Then it also, we also spoke extensively about, simplifying even the service providers, and like creating solution for them as well. So right now, how we have designed our use cases is we look at not just the convenience for users, but also for service providers. So the use cases have been designed in a way that we can address, compliance requirements that is mandated by, for example, for financial institutions by the central bank, for telecommunications by their own regulatory authority. So the use case design process was very creative for us, and not just in terms of compliance requirements, but also, for example, we spoke. I find this very interesting myself, but for Netflix, how password sharing is such a big problem, and then we do have an OTT platform, like OTT provider here as well. So we were like, it might be interesting to solve this problem for them as well. So we approached them saying that we want to solve password sharing for your customers and help you, help you solve a business problem through NDI with our passwordless login. So we are not just thinking of creating a product that meets just digital identity solution, but also helps solve problems for businesses and organizations.
Tony, this suddenly doesn't sound so utopian. I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
Oh no,
half of my streaming platforms will disappear.
I won't be able to watch Love Island USA anymore. It's gonna be a big problem for me.
No, but seriously, that's very clever. That's really interesting.
Because
So that's
otherwise it is, sorry, I cut you off, but
no.
because otherwise it's very hard to drive adoption, right? Because
Yeah.
it cannot just be a government push mandate, because then it can be a very slow process. But if businesses are going to, integrate with us and then say that if you want to, access our platforms and access our services, you need to use the login features that NDI provides, or the eKYC features that NDI provides, then basically you drive adoption from both sides. So that way, I think it helps onboard citizens and residents quicker.
Yeah, that's once again, it sounds like a very smart, clever approach to building this all out. I also was curious about not only about the other systems you looked at, but were there any other organizations? You mentioned TOIP was involved in kind of advising it. I know from our reporting on other projects, the World Bank is often involved, or the World Economic Forum, groups like this. Were there any groups like that involved in this, or was it largely just Bhutan pushing through with some advisory groups providing assistance?
Yeah, so just a thing. So we actually referred mostly to a book called Self-Sovereign Identity. I think the author is Alex and Drummond Reed. So basically, we reached out to them, and because that book is the cornerstone to how we went about development. So Drummond Reed and Alex were actually the one who were helping us and also connecting us with other organization who could help us. And they were so when we first started, we actually started with a platform called Verity, and also we started with the blockchain Hyperledger Indy blockchain. And so those were so they were actually a number of organizations, a few organizations which advise us and led us through the choosing of platform, like there's the Verity's platform. Although we moved away from that because the Verity was again acquired by some other company who discontinued the platform development, and then we have to move it to others. So yeah, so they were like individuals. Like I'd like to give a shout out to Drummond Reed and Alex and also Eric, who helped us there. So, but then apart from that, maybe Pallavi, is any organizations you have on top of your head?
So, GovTech agency funded the entire project. So we didn't really receive funding from external international NGOs. Of course, we had advisory, and we did reach out to, like Anand already covered, to some of the international industry experts. But in terms of funding itself, not really. It was mainly a push from Government Technology Agency, and of course, Groupe Holding and Investments that actually did the development work.
I know you mentioned earlier that Bhutan NDI is now that the project is basically like in place, now it has become kind of a spin-off company.
Yeah.
So is that what's where are you going with this from here? Is it now you're going to be advising other groups about how to build digital ID, or what's your main activity now going forward?
I think going forward, so I think the one thing we didn't talk about was that during the project, we actually had Bhutan NDI Act was passed through our parliament, where it made that all the information that's passed through our digital identity is legitimate, and there is no denial of service based on the information sent through our wallet. So what that meant is that now we also have to be self-regulatory. I mean, we need to be autonomous so that we functioning with proper guidelines and rules and laws. So that's why we are now in the in the midst of being a company here. So now here our main mandate right now is to maintain what we have developed, and then make sure that this is something that, like Pallavi mentioned, needs to be robust and working at all times. So this is one part of the thing, and then we need to also make sure that we have proper guidelines and policy, everything in place that regulates us also. So, and then there's like lots of other things that regulates our company, and make sure that we are functioning with no bias and something that's robust and always there for the country to be used. Now, going to your second question, like our company now also are looking into way in which we can help other countries develop their NDI projects. So there are some, we are talking to some countries where, like, if they are interested on decentralized thing, we started giving our advice, our user support also to whoever is there. So that's one thing that we are help other countries also start developing their product. So there are a few countries that we are talking to. So I don't know if we can name them, but yeah, there are a few countries we are talking to, and we are trying to help them build their own NDI and National Digital Identity platform.
That's really interesting. That I feel like you have a particularly, because we've seen other countries do this as well, that they develop their kind of framework and then start advising others. But it sounds like Bhutan has a particularly strong pitch, because Bhutan basically, it sounds like, was making its own way with this. So there's no hidden agenda from some other group, private sector, whatever. It's like, no, we built
yeah. So
we built
also we have, I think we have also, like, I don't know what's the latest count. So we have onboarded like almost 115,000 users, which has the digital identity here, because like as mentioned before, because of the terrain and the reach of the network and internet, and we still have fairly digital backward section of the people where it doesn't have the access to a good network or phones. So based on that, our target, what we have achieved is quite good. So that is like, when other countries also sees that we have this much of people onboarded and this actually is in use rather than as a conceptual idea. So that's one of our strong pitch, where people are actually trusting us to help them build their identity rather than something that's just a conceptual part, and something like you mentioned with no hidden agenda.
yeah.
And even not just that, but we are also continuously expanding on the use cases. And I think that's again another, a very good pitch, because while we are of course focusing on providing verifiable credentials into the wallet, and also like helping solve problems around compliance and eKYC and all of that, we are also looking at just addressing some of the more complex problems. So for example, let's say like opening a bank account just requires us to design an eKYC functionality, but applying for a loan is a much more complex process that that has to have a lot of things in place, because it just does not require verification of only one user, but also their guarantor. And I don't know if if a land has been mortgaged, then so there are various moving pieces. So the complexity of these business processes keep increasing, and we are trying to create use cases that can address these complexities without the applicant of the loan having to travel to the bank to apply for the loan. So I think it helps because we are actually able to showcase that we are actually trying to create a very seamless digital experience for users. It's not just about opening a bank account from your home, but to avail loan, you still have to visit the bank. So yeah.
That's again, like, as you say, it just adds to the pitch. Tony and I are sold. When we're developing our national ID system here, we will be taking the Bhutan model. But I know we're just about out of time here. Tony, I don't want to cut you off if you had anything else you wanted to pop in before we wrap up.
No, not really. Just thank you both for your time. And this has been really fascinating and delightful.
Yeah, this has been so interesting, and we really appreciate you both coming on the show and talking to us about Bhutan NDI. It's a fascinating project. So thanks again for coming and talking with us. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having us, and I hope that we were able to, explain the project well enough and to give you a very good perspective into what we are doing here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Alex and Tony. So yeah, like Pallavi mentioned, like I hope we could give the overall gist of what we are doing. So of course, it's quite we had a limited time to really talk into thing. So maybe next time we'll be talking more, and maybe we'll have more use cases and more success stories to share with you. And yeah, so maybe in 5 years' time, like we mentioned, we'll have achieved everything that we talked about, and we'll have more things to talk about.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And I was looking at some photos of Bhutan the other day, and Tony, we should actually go there in person. It looks beautiful. We should do an in-person interview next time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the opposite of where we live.